Welcome to Wheelock's Latin, chapter 27. In this chapter, we're going to be looking at the irregular comparison of adjectives. We'll be looking at a group of adjectives that end in lis, another group that end in er, and then a group of 7 adjectives that are completely irregular in their comparative and superlative forms. So let's look first at the irregular comparison of adjectives, specifically the lis endings. Now, some adjectives ending in lis have an irregular superlative form. Now, we have already learned that the superlative ending is issemus aum. However, there are some adjectives that end in lis that will, rather than have issemus aum as the superlative ending, will have an ending of lemus aum. Lemus aum. So this will replace the issemus. Let's look at the example here of facil. Facilis, facile. The stem here is facil, and so when we add the lemus aum, we end up with facilimus aum. The comparative stays the same, it doesn't change at all. All right, now here is the list of the adjectives that end in lis and have the irregular superlative form. Facilis, facile, facilimus aum, difficilis, difficile, difficilimus aum, similis, simile, similimus aum, dissimilis, dissimile, dissimilimus aum, gracilis, gracile, gracilimus aum, and humilis, humile, forming humilim. That's a hard one to say. Humilimus aum. That's a mouthful. Now, just as a quick reminder, there are other adjectives that end in lis, but they will have the regular superlative. It's only this list of what we got six of these adjectives that end in lemus aum, the superlative. So go ahead and memorize this list and make sure you know how to form the superlative. Now, we've also got a group of er adjectives that are going to form the superlative in a different fashion. Now, this applies to all adjectives that end in er, not a specific group. All of the adjectives ending in er will form in this irregular fashion. All right, so there's 2 things to point out. Number 1, that the ending instead of issemus aum is remus aum. All right, so we're going to have 2 points here. This is the first one here. Go ahead and show you what that looks like. Again, this superlative ending is normally issemus aum. Now we're going to replace that with remus aum. And that'll become our new ending. Here's an example of liber, libera, liberum that we've learned means free. Of course, the comparative form does not change at all. And so we're going to take the stem liber and add the ending in the superlative with remus aum. That gives us liberimus aum. All right, so that's pretty simple. It's very similar to the lis. Instead of lemus aum, it's remus aum. All right, now here's a second point that might be a little confusing, but it'll be all right. You can figure this out here. Here's a second point to keep in mind. Rather than using the feminine base, the masculine base or stem is used. Now, if you remember that for er adjectives, some adjectives like free, liber, have the stem liber throughout all the forms. It's in the masculine, the feminine, and the neuter. So we have liber, libera, liberum, liberi, 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 etc. So liber, that e stays in the stem throughout. Now you can see here in the feminine form, the e is consistently there as well as in the neuter form. So liber in all the forms for this particular adjective. However, there are some adjectives like pulcher that in the feminine they lose the e, and so the stem, you really have to look in the feminine form in order to find the stem. You can see in the masculine genitive, it's pulchri, not pulcheri. So it's from the feminine that we really get the stem, pulchr. And you see that in the rest of the form. It's only in that masculine nominative singular that the e is there. Here's another word, acer, acris, acre. Again, the masculine nominative singular, ace, acer. However, in the feminine, you have the acr. We lose that e, and then that acr is throughout the rest of the forms, acris, acri, acrim, acri, etc. So it's really the feminine that we look to in order to find the stem. Now, what we're learning here, this was just a quick review, is that in order to form the superlative of these ER adjectives, we're not going to use the feminine base. It's the masculine base that we will use to form the superlative. So let's do a quick review here of both of these 2 points. Okay, so adjectives ending in ER will have remus as the stem in the superlative rather than ismus. So let's see how both of these 2 points come to play here. Here we have ismus aum, the superlative ending being replaced by remus aum, so that's point number 1. Let's put it together here with libera liberum. There we go. We're about the comparative, it's the same here. So here's the superlative. We're going to take liber, the masculine stem, and add remus aum. Now, where we really need to pay attention here is with words like pulcher, pulcra, pulcrum, where that E drops out. So again, comparative we're not going to worry about, we're just going to look at the superlative. So it's pulcherimus. So notice we're using the masculine stem, not the feminine. It's pulcher, not pulcra or pulcr that we're using. So pulcherimus. Again, with this adjective acer, acris, acre, we're going to use the masculine ACE. So we end up with acerimus aum. And here you can see that the liber, pulcher, and the acer, all of those masculine stems are used in the superlative form. So nota bene, notice that the comparative forms are still using the base of the adjective as seen in the feminine nominative positive form. So the comparative form is liber. Now that's the same. There you go. That's the same as the masculine. That's why I've got it in red and not purple here, but it's a different color red. But in the comparative form for pulcher, pulcra, pulcrum, the comparative is pulcrior, pulcrius. We use the feminine base. For acer, acris, acre, we have acrior, acrius, again using the feminine base. So just keep in mind that the comparative is not impacted by this rule. It's only the superlative. Use the masculine base and remus aum. All right, let's look finally here to a completely irregular group of adjectives when they're formed in the comparative and superlative form. All right, some adjectives are completely different in their comparative and superlative form, completely different than their positive form, and these are very common, and you really just have to memorize these forms. They're used a lot. So let's look at some of these examples. Bonus aum, you've learned that word. We've learned that word. First and second declension adjective meaning good. The comparative looks nothing like that. It's melior, melius, meaning better. And then for the superlative, we have optimus aum, meaning best. This is where Optimus Prime comes from. He's the very best of all the transformers. We've got magnus aum, we learned for great or large. And then we've got major, majus, greater. The word major comes from here. That I will shift into a J in the Germanic and English tradition here. So major, majus, meaning greater. And then finally the superlative, it's maximus aum, greatest. We have malus aum, we've learned that for bad. And peor, perius, is worse. And then finally for worst, we have pessimus aum. Obviously we get pessimist from here. Multus aum, meaning much. For more, notice there's no masculine or feminine form. There's only a neuter. It's plus. We'll look more specifically on how we decline that one because it's irregular in how it's declined. And finally, the superlative form here is plurimus aum. For parvus aum, small, we have in the comparative minor, minus, meaning smaller. And then we have in the superlative minimus aum for smallest. Now, this word, prior, prius, does not have a positive form. It's only got a comparative and superlative form, but it means former. And the superlative form is primus aum, meaning first. And then finally here, superus aum, meaning that thing that is above, that above. The comparative form is superior, superius, higher. And then in the superlative, we actually have 2 different forms. Sumus aum, meaning highest or furthest, but you can also have supremus aum, meaning highest or last. So these forms are completely irregular, used a lot. You need really to memorize these. Now, concerning the word for more, the word plus, I want to see how this is declined in the comparative. Plus is declined in an irregular fashion, and again, kind of needs to be memorized. Here's what it looks like. We're going to take the plus, the pluris, There's a stem here that's consistent throughout. It's the plur, P-L-U-R. Again, there's no masculine or feminine singular, but we do have the feminine, masculine, feminine plural, as well as the neuter, singular, and plural. And we're going to take the plur stem and simply add third declension I stem endings here. So blank is em, s, ibis, s, ibis for the masculine and feminine. Again, no singular, only plural. For the neuter, it's blank is blank, ia, ibis, ibis. Now, the thing to point out here is there's obviously no dative singular in the neuter. It doesn't appear in classical Latin, so that's the reason why there's a blank there. But it basically is the plur stem plus third declension I stem endings. All right. There you go. And of course, remember the neuter rule, whatever's in the nominative is in the accusative in the neuter. All right. Now, one final note. The word magis and maxime with comparison of adjectives. The comparative forms of many or maybe even most first and second declension adjectives that end in a vowel. The example here, idonius. The stem here is idone, so it's ending in a vowel. And it's usaum, of course, first and second declension endings. This word means suitable. When you form the comparative and the superlative, we're going to add the word magis, the word more, to form the comparative, and maxime, meaning most, for the superlative. Here's what that looks like. Idonius, meaning suitable, in the positive form. The comparative is magis adeonis, more suitable, and the superlative is maxime adeonis, most suitable. So just keep in mind that many or most first and second declension adjectives, if their stem ends in a vowel, we're not going to use the e or eus for the comparative endings and the isimus aum endings. We're going to go with adding magis and maxime. All right. Don't forget to study your vocabulary. We will have a quiz later this week.